you
Yes.
actually go against the status quo. Can you kind of touch on that a little bit?
You just seem to always just march to the beat of your own drum. And I think having that, self-awareness and self-confidence is what allows you to propel in your career.
At the core of everything that I do is creativity. And I think that with us being created by a creator, I feel like everyone is inherently creative.
Welcome to another episode of the Wolf and the Doctor podcast. I'm your host, Dr. John Devereaux, along with my co-host, Mr. Glenn Curry. And once again, we have a very special guest.
This guest right here, man, this is probably my favorite guest. I know I say that a lot, but this is truly one of my favorite guests. He's a longtime friend, man. 20 years. I've known this guy from, growing up in the same neighborhood to high school to college and, you name it. Our very special guest, Rayvon Carter.
Yo, how's everyone doing? Thank y'all for having me on, brothers. I don't take it lightly. I appreciate the invitation. I'm excited to see what comes from this conversation.
Yeah, and we always start off the episode with our quote of the week. And the quote of this week comes from you. I stole this off of your blog, and you said that at the core of my existence, there is creativity. Now, explain that quote for our listeners and what you mean by that.
I did say that. I mean that. I mean that too. I feel like at the core of everything that I do is creativity. And I think that with us being created by a creator, I feel like everyone is inherently creative. So when I say that creativity is at the core of who I am, I mean that it influences everything that I do. It influences how I think. It influences how I approach relationships. It influences how I approach work. And it just really consumes me. It can be very overwhelming, sometimes in a not so good way, but sometimes in an amazing way. But it just kind of influences how I exist in the world. Everything that I do it through the lens of creativity.
Speaking of the things that you do, typically we have guests on here who straddle the line between entrepreneurship and then also a 9-to-5 job. So tell us a little bit about your 9-to-5 position.
Oh yeah, so I'm a writer at a company. Some people may have heard of Apple, and I think that it's still very surreal. Not because I didn't, I never not thought that I was good enough to work at a company in Silicon Valley like this, but I think that it just wasn't. I mean, Glenn talked about like our upbringing and stuff. Nobody really from the Bay or Silicon Valley ever came to like our schools or anything like that. So it just wasn't even in my vantage point that this was like a place that I could work. So I'm definitely very fortunate and blessed to be able to say that I am a full-time writer at Apple. I do a lot of the marketing for our products. So I'm housed specifically in the marketing and communications department. So unbeknownst to like my family and my friends, I do not know how to fix your iPhone. I do any of those things or help you out with services and things, but I can tell you about the latest commercial and where the stuff was shot and all of that good stuff. So yeah, that's what I've been doing. It'll be 4 years in January, which seems very surreal in itself. But yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, and I mean, to get to that position, I mean, I was coming from a corporate position. I was at Uber's corporate office, right? And those positions aren't as easy as people think to kind of get into. So for you, was that like easy? Like, hey, look, my name's Rayvon, let me in, or was it like a trial and error, struggle to kind of get in there?
It was definitely the latter. I think that it was just a sum of like a lot of different choices, a lot of different connections, a lot of people being met, a lot of emails being forgotten, a lot of just like, what did this person say? Like, how should I like bring up this conversation again? And a ton of interviews, like an incredible amount of interviews stretched across what seemed to be to me like such a long time, to the extent that at one point I was just like, this is not even going to happen because I've just been interviewing for too long. I think they're just pulling my leg with this whole thing. So the time from which, just to give like a high level, the time from which I was first introduced to the prospect of even working there, and the time that I actually started working there was like it was close to like 2 years.
Man.
So yeah,
Wow.
So how does someone stay encouraged for a 2-year job interview process?
Starts with your attitude for sure, right? Like I feel like, I was working at a nonprofit at the time and I was pursuing other opportunities, but no one outside of like my very close circle knew that I was not happy in that position. And when I say not happy, I mean like it just wasn't allowing me to operate in the fullness of the creative spirit that I knew that I wanted to like let out. But I went and I did that job with integrity,
Hmm.
even though I was there for much longer than I thought that I was going to be there when I initially took that job. And, so my attitude played a major part in it, right? Like it was just kind of like, I don't subscribe to this whole like, don't tell anybody your moves. I do feel like everybody doesn't need to know your moves, but I think that you need to have a small circle of accountability with people who can check in with you on that because we weren't created to do life alone. As my pastor would say, we were created to, like link in with like wolf packs and win at life with the help of those around us, right? So I had a small, succinct group of people who knew like where I was trying to go, what I was trying to do. And them just checking in with me helped my morale as I was like going to this job that I wanted to get out of, as I was pursuing this job that I wanted to get, that I saw myself at, as I was like reworking my portfolio, building it from the ground up, out of the mud, so to speak, because I didn't really have an existing portfolio. Um, so my attitude just really like fueled that. And then I think it was just like, you got to be able to see yourself beyond where you're at, right? So like vision,
Hmm.
like you can have the right attitude, but if you don't have the vision, it's just kind of like, where are you going, right? So it's like I always saw myself beyond where I was at. Like I think every stage of my life, particularly from like college, when I first started college and on, it's just like I see where I want to be, and I'm unrelenting in my efforts until that comes to pass. And then when it comes to pass, I'm just like, okay, we can go a little further.
Now, from what I'm hearing from what you're saying, like your answer to that question, you talked about a lot of internal factors, such as like, having that vision of where
Mhm.
you want to go. You talked about having the integrity in the current position that you were already in, but you also mentioned those external factors, such as having like a really tight knit group
Yes.
around you as well. So I think that perfect blend of those internal and external motivators is like really what helps a lot of people to just kind of push forward.
Yes, absolutely. I would say that that is 1,000% the case, right? Like we are the sum of the people that we're around, and we're the sum of our innermost thoughts. So it's just kind of like, to your point, when those things are like juxtaposed together, so to speak, it's just kind of like greatness can come from that. But I think you have to see it and you have to like act on it. Like you have to move. Like I think too many of us are like stagnant in like our dreams and like that we're stagnant in like what we want to do and we feel like it's too far-fetched and we allow people's fear to kind of like permeate our own thought processes and we start to think like maybe Jonathan was right, like low-key, like what am I doing? I'm like Glenn was low-key right, like they're not gonna hire somebody like me, I don't even have the experience. And it's kind of like you can't give in to like thoughts like that because it might be coming from a good place on their end, they're just trying to protect you from being hurt, but ultimately like what's for you is for you, and you got to pursue it authoritatively because you deserve to be there just like anybody else. So that's like kind of like my mantra. It's kind of like my internal monologue, so to speak, every 2 weeks to myself. Like you're doing what you were like designed to do. You have the right to be here. You are pretty good at what you do, and the work that you do helps other people see that they can do it too. So
Yeah, and I know you touched on. I know when you were saying it took you 2 years to interview. I think, like John and I said, like that's extensive. Like that's a big thing, and
yeah.
to stay motivated is even bigger. So, what were some of the challenges that you faced within that 2 years? I mean, external and internal.
Yeah, well, for starters, like, so the interview portion itself, too, just for like clarification, in the 2 years was probably like the last year. Like the part leading up to that was just like preliminary work. It was just kind of like, I know this person, you should talk to this person, you should email this person. Oh, I heard that this person is looking for this, you should hit them up. So the first year was literally like, I don't even think I had even talked to anybody. It was just like straight up like electronic intros and just like, oh, for the future, keep me in mind. So like those sort of things. Going through that, I just feel like, being caught between like where you currently are and where you hope to be is a very stressful moment in time, because you're like, there's like this notion of two-ness, I feel like, where a part of you is like where you want to be and a part of you is like situated where you are. So it's kind of like it's this constant tension of like, is the action that I'm doing now going to help me get to where I want to be, or is that going to secure me in where I'm at? And it's just kind of like, it's this constant like, I don't want to say microcosm, but it's just like, it's this constant like, you just have to make a decision about like, what is this current action going to pull me further to? And it's just kind of like, if you're satisfied with that answer, like if you want to stay where you're at, I mean, do that. And it's like, if you're not trying to do that, you want to go where you want to be, you're going to have to do what you might not have done before. And I had to struggle my way through that, because I was just kind of like, at what point should I stop pursuing what I think is for me, or that I know is for me, and just succumb to like my reality just so that I can provide in the now. So it's like, sometimes you might not be able to provide in the now. You might have to like, struggle now so that you can not struggle later. So just like pulsating between those two perspectives was quite a bit of a challenge for me. And then also just like, honestly, seeing other people like win, that stung a little, like a lot. Like it's just kind of like, you seeing people who come up after you that you think were not as qualified, that you think, did this, and, and add to that, like social media, like everyone is just putting up the reels of their life. They want you to see everyone, but they're not putting up, and rightfully so, they're not putting up the chapters that they don't want anyone to read out loud. So everyone just putting up the highlights, and then you're struggling in secrecy with this small group of a support system, and then you're seeing everybody else seemingly win. And it's just kind of like, you start thinking, I mean, I felt like it was a very natural thing for me. I started thinking like, am I not doing this right? And should I be doing something else? Should I like try to switch paths, switch gears a bit? So sticking on my path was very difficult as well.
And I will say that's a really good point, because a lot of people do just see those Instagram highlights or Facebook highlights. They see
Yeah.
the posts where like, hey, I got this job at such and such place, but they tend to negate or, omit the struggle along the way. Now, that brings me to one of the posts that you've made where you posted, a side by side picture of this is where I'm at right now. But you also gave that backstory, because I think a lot of times people need to hear that backstory just
Mhm.
to know that it wasn't all sweet, the entire route.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, bro. And I feel like, honestly, um, and out of fear of not trying to be like too deep, I feel like I am very selective on when I choose to be that transparent, because I feel like in this world of social media, it can come across, if not used correctly, very performative and very just like egotistical and very like sacrilegious and all these other things that I don't really want to be associated with. But I can say that I can count on one hand the amount of times that transparency has made its way to social media. And I feel like I've always been very intentional on that, and how I do that, because I feel like at the times that I've done it, an immeasurable amount of people have hit me up like, this is just a thing that I needed to read. And I would like to think that there's a certain level of discernment there with like knowing when to be that transparent and like when to like use my platform to like actually let people know. Because what I found is that people would just like create these narratives for you. Like so many people I've met, I was like, oh, that's so great that you got hired out of college at Apple. I'm like, wait a minute, like that's when did that happen? It's just like it's just like that's not how that went, right? And it's just kind of like, I think that my upbringing and just like my family life and just like coming from like Chicago public schools, like I think that I just have a very non-traditional approach, even transferring to Linda where Glenn and I first met. I just think that my life is very relatable because I know so many people who shared that experience with me. So I tell my coworkers all the time, I'm not the only creative from where I come from. I know creatives, like I know it's a lot of us where we come from. And I just so happened, I didn't look out, but it's like, preparation met talent, met opportunity. And it's just kind of like when all those things align, I was able to like seize the moment. But I try to be transparent to your point, to inspire people to know like where you are is not where you have to end up. And it's just kind of like, I've been there and I'm talking to you from a place of experience and gratitude. I'm not talking to you from a place of like everything was given to me, because nothing was given to me.
Mhm.
Except grace, of course, but like as far as like the natural realm with like these opportunities, everything happened as a result of like earnest work. So yeah, I just want to inspire people to do the same thing.
Yeah. So do you think a lot of what you did prior to getting the job, right? Like
Yeah,
all the work that you put in, all the time and effort, that really played a major part into your preparation to getting that job at Apple.
absolutely, 1,000%. Like I think that one of my prayers, I think we all have like these go-to prayers, so to speak, or like affirmations. And one of mine is that I do not receive anything, whether that's a relationship, whether that's a job opportunity, whether that's, whatever other type of professional opportunity. My prayer is that I never get it prematurely, because what a shame it would be. My thought is like, what a shame it would be to get something that's so great and you weren't prepared to keep it, so you lost it.
Mm.
So I feel like if this opportunity would have presented itself any year prior to it actually presenting itself and actualizing, I would have lost it because I didn't have the tools needed to keep it. I didn't have the language. Like doing all of these internships that I did post grad school, even though I felt like an internship was beneath me, like doing these internships helped me to learn the language, helped me to like get my lingo intact, helped me to start my portfolio, all these other things that were like incrementally like helping me and preparing me for that moment. So like when I met the person who kind of like put everything, switch gears for me, I was prepared to like have that conversation and talk that talk and walk that walk too. So I think that everything that we do now is like informing where we want to be later, whether we realize that or not.
For students, I think a lot of them believe like if you don't get that high paying job right after you graduate, then it's been a failure. But as
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned, there was that journey that you had to go on to get to that dream job that you had.
Yes.
So you talked a little bit about some of the difficulties, as well as some of the struggles that you had along the way. But what was like your strongest motivator, I guess, to keep you pursuing that vision? Because I think a lot of times people can have a vision,
Yeah,
but they can become stagnant in their attempt to achieve whatever it is that they want.
absolutely. Absolutely. For me, honestly, it was just like, this is what I want from myself, and that's it. That's the sentence. That's it. Like I just was unwilling. In short, I was just unwilling to accept what society said that I was able to get. Like I just felt like we've made more people famous for much less. And this is just how I think to myself. I'm just kind of like, there is no way that I would be put here to only get the life that I have thus far. Like I just don't believe that that's my reality. I just don't think that that's why any of us are here. And I was just determined. I was just like, I'm rejecting every notion that is put before me as like, this is what you are able to do. I'm like, no, thank you, because I honestly think you believe that, but I don't believe that, and that's it. And I don't know what's next, but we're gonna find out, because there's more than this. I know that much. I don't know what's next, but I know next thing now. So it's just like, yeah, that was it. I just was like, that's the tweet. Like, there's more.
You seem to be able to walk the line of being present minded, but also a visionary. You are very cognizant of like what's going on in your present state, but you're also very aware that your current circumstances don't dictate what your future holds. And you
Yeah.
seem to have a very firm grasp on what you want that future to look like.
Mhm.
So, as a visionary, I want you to talk to us a little bit about this concept that you have from king to king.
Oh, so dun, dun, dun. So that so King to King really was like it was birthed out of this insight that I was just tired. I was tired, brothers, of just seeing the same black men, the same people celebrated every year. Right. So that was like my initial frustration. I was just kind of like, there's more black people who have done exceptional things that deserve to be celebrated during Black History Month and beyond. Like I understand that we want to use Malcolm X and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and like Rosa Parks, and we want to use the people that we use. But I feel like that's fine as like a launch pad, as a starting point. But it's like we have to go deeper because we cannot expect the next generation of thought leadership, particularly from families that look like ours, from backgrounds that are similar to ours. We can't expect them to go further if we're not giving them a firm foundation of who they are and where we come from as a people. And not only that, it's like we're throwing out these names and we're not even giving any like depth to it. It's like I don't even think people are like learning the "I have a dream" speech anymore. It's like we're just referencing it. It's just like, well, MLK, I have a dream. It's like Malcolm X, Rosa Parks sat down. It's like, but we're not even putting any like layers to like the story so they can understand like the timeline of how these events unfolded, right? So that was the frustration from which this idea was even birthed. And that was probably in 2018 when I first had the idea. As creatives, you all probably also know, like, oftentimes we have all these ideas up here. It's like, come on, I'm working at Apple. They're getting most of my creative juices. And then like whatever I'm doing on the side is getting like the rest of my creativity. So it's just kind of like I am like burnt out. I have to fight off creative burnout like all the time. Like it's just like I had this great idea and I was just like, I don't have the time to do that. So I just like that was it. I didn't act on the idea until 2019. So I was like, I'm not gonna do it. 2019, the idea came back. I'm like, you know what, bro, you should really do that. Like I'm talking to myself, like, like the Kermit mirror thing. I'm like, you should really do that. Like, so I tried to do it in January of 2019, and then I underestimated how much time it was gonna take. So like every photographer, I must have talked to like 7 photographers, and some of them agreed, and then some of them like backed out after they agreed. They were just like, this guy's crazy. Like looking back, they probably were like, this guy's nuts. If you think that this is about to get pulled, the magnitude of this project is about to get pulled off in 3 weeks, you're crazy. I was like, yeah, I want to go live for Black History Month. And everyone was just like, this year? I'm like, yeah. And they were like, are you insane? Like that's not how this works. So 2018, the idea came to me. 2019, I didn't act on it, and I failed in my mind because I wasn't able to do it because I didn't have enough time. So I spent the whole rest of 2019 like, okay, what do I need to do to make sure it happens in 2020? So I found a photographer, ended up being a really good friend of mine. We ended up shooting, and then I realized how much I underestimated this project because what I decided to do is make a short list of like contemporary, historic, and fictional Black male figures who positively impacted my life. And I took a photo of them and I recreated it every day for the month of Black History Month. I was like, that's what I'm gonna do. Boom. That's what I didn't even have a name. I was like, I don't even know what I'm gonna name it, but whatever. So we started taking the pictures. The photos on average took us about 3 to 4 hours each. So each person was a studio session of about 3.5 to 4 hours. And then I saw, oh, I definitely underestimated how long this was going to take to like pull off. I thought it was just going to be like, oh, put the clothes on, take the photo, boom. Put the clothes on, take the photo, boom. It definitely was not that. So over the course of about a year, most of 2019, we took these photos. And, it just began to take on a life of its own. And the more photos I took, I was just kind of like, wow, this is like how I saw it up here. And it's just like when you see something out in the world as you saw it up here, it's like a very magical feeling. I was just like, okay, this is happening. So then I'll never forget 2020 comes. This is like 2 weeks before I'm about to go, not even 2 weeks. I'm not even gonna give myself that much time. This was like 2 days before I was about to go live. And I still didn't have a name. And I still didn't know. And I was just like talking to some of my friends. I'm like, I don't know what I'm about to name this. And they were giving me insight and stuff. So there was this one friend at work, Lisa. I went to talk to her. I'm like, I don't know how to post these. I don't know, like, should I do them in groups? Should I do them one by one? Should I do one every day? Like, should I put the original first in mine or should I put mine and then the original? Like, I was pressed. I'm like, this stuff makes sense. Like it matters how this goes out. So I was like very obsessive. And she helped me walk through like, okay, we're gonna do one a day. We're gonna do yours first. So there's a little guess, and then we're gonna see the original one. And then in some cases, you might want to do the original one first. It just depends on like the medium that you're using. So that helped me calm down. And then just talking with her and talking with everyone else, I realized like the word that kept coming up was king. When people ask me why did I want to do it, I'm like, because Black men are kings. And I just feel like, you know, I need to celebrate that in a different way. And that's when it hit me. Literally, it was just like, okay, it's like, dude, the answer is there already. I'm like, king, what can I do with that? What can I do with that? And I'm like, dang, if I'm saying that they're kings because they're Black men, that means that I'm also a king as a Black man. So from king to king, thank you for whatever became my writer's construct. Writers love a good copy construct. So when I was able to get it down succinctly, like it's just going to be from king to king, comma, thank you for blank, I said, got it. So, after that, man, of course, I was just like, what else am I going to name it? But from king to king, there's no other name that would, you know, give this the same level of like intensity and power and admiration as that. So, yeah, I only thought that I was going to do it for social media, and I was going to print out like 3 books, one for me, one for my mama, and probably one for my siblings, and that was it. And I never thought about making a book. I didn't expect it to get as popular as it did on social media, to be honest, because I mean, I knew it was a cool idea, but I had saw other people do things similar to that, but it was never exactly like I saw it up here. So that's the thing that compelled me rather to like make mine, because I was just kind of like, people are doing things that are similar, but they're not doing it like I see this coming to life. So I was just going to do a little social media campaign, and I was just going to make myself a little book to commemorate that. And then people started asking in the comments, like, when is the book coming? I'm like, the book? I'm like, what? Like the book? So yeah, that's how the book was born. It was actually born by the people. The book was going to happen, but the book going public happened because of the people, because I wasn't gonna do that.
So let me share my story. The first one that I saw, I can't remember which one it was, but just as a photographer, the way that you not only replicated the outfit, but the exact pose, I think that's what set it apart. And then as you continue to keep doing it, I started getting a little pressed, like, man, why did I not come up with an idea like this? I'm hating. I was like, man, that's a really good concept. And then when you finally did release the book, I must have got on social media too late, because by the time I got to the website, the book was sold out. So I'm like,
Yes,
man, he was doing major things.
yeah,
And I mean, that was just such an amazing project. And I'm sure as a creative, it's like you said, it's so fulfilling to have that idea and then bring it to fruition. You know, our last guest was talking about that process of ideation to creation. And that's where a lot of the, you know, the grunt work happens. But to actually see it being fulfilled in real time as you were doing like that first one, that second one, and then all the way to the publishing of the book, I'm sure that just felt really good as a creator.
it feels amazing, bro, honestly. And like, that book did sell out way quicker than that book sold out 5 times. And I'm like, okay, God, okay. Like when stuff like that happens to me, I'm just like, okay, I'm just gonna, this ain't me. I'm just here. It's just like, I'm gonna ride this. But it's like, I was just very thankful, and like gratitude just overcame me, because I was just like, even when I decided to sell the book, I was just kind of like, oh, I'm just going to probably sell a few copies and it'll be a nice little thing that exists in the world. And it's just like, it just kept selling out. And I'm like, I might have underestimated the project. I'm like, okay. But for what it's worth, it is sold out. But if either of you would like one, we can talk about that offline. We can talk about that offline, but it's been quite the ride, and I'm very thankful for that. I have like a couple of proofs around, and I mean, if I was teary-eyed almost, like looking at this thing just in person. I'm like, this is geesh. And it just got me to thinking, as I hold this, it just makes me very thankful even now. And I'm just like, it just makes me question, like, what else are you holding on to that you need to release? I think is the question that like comes from this when I'm looking at it. It's just like, how many ideas do you have that should be things, but they're still thoughts? And it's just kind of like, this is some newfound motivation here to like do some stuff that I had put down for good. Like now I'm like I'm bringing out all my old notebooks. Like everything is everything is just like we out here. So it's been great.
And you know what? You always been a great writer, a great visionary, and things like that. I mean, outside of the book, you also have a blog that you have a lot of guests on, and you write about. But what I like about your blog is not traditional, right?
Yeah.
In the way that you write, because you don't follow regular academics type of format. You
Yes.
actually go against the status quo. Can you kind of touch on that a little bit?
I mean, that's the tweet right there. But yeah, man, that's you know, every now and then someone will ask me about that. So, and I'm always pleasantly surprised because I thought that was just something that was another thing that I thought was like, oh, this is just a small thing. This is a decision that I'm making. But it's had lasting impacts, and it proves to be a great conversation starter in a lot of creative spaces I've learned. Um, I felt like who made this construct as a writer. It's like, don't get me wrong. Come on. It's like journalism, BA, English MA. I could write. I know how to subscribe to this if I want to. And it's like, I'm purposefully choosing because I started just asking questions like, who said that you have to start every sentence with uppercase? Who made up these mechanics? And, I don't know who did it, but I'm pretty sure that person doesn't look like me. And I'm just kind of like, I don't have to subscribe. That's where I was just like, I don't have to subscribe to that. Like, this is my website. This is my world. I'm curating this. And it's like, in a world where I have to succumb to those rules and everything else that I do, this is like the one outlet that I don't have to do that. And it's just kind of like, I'm going to write it how I want to write it. And that's just how I feel. And I've had people, there was somebody who was kind of trolling me because of that. And they like shared one of my blogs. This was like years ago, probably like 4 years ago. And he's like, he's clearly not even educated because this was written horribly. And I just laughed. I'm like,
You missed the bandwagon.
yeah,
You
I'm
missed,
like, hey, I'm like, it's too big for you, King. It's okay. It's okay. Like, but yeah, that's why I decided to do that. That's my world. I can create it how I want to. But ultimately, man, I also think like the Queen's English or like standardized writing is it's a form of systemic oppression in a way because I feel like everybody can't like relate to that way, and I feel like that creates like barriers to entry with like communication. So I feel like me writing, I feel like we do this already, particularly at least I do as like as a creative of color. How I write, how I create is not always how I talk with my family, and I feel like the goal was to like bring how I talk with my family, that familiarity with that to the blog, so that you would feel like you're talking to me. That's the best. That's the highest form of that's the highest compliment that I could get. One of them, when I hear people say, like every now and then someone will say, I feel like I'm talking to you when I read your blog. I'm like, yes, that's the goal. Like, I just don't want you to feel like I'm reading this and it's like self-help. I want you to feel like, hey, bro was spitting. Like that was some good stuff. Like, I feel like I learned something.
I will say, when I first came across the blog, this was years ago, and I noticed the same thing that Glenn pointed out. I was like, okay, well, he's starting every sentence with a lowercase letter, and like it struck me like for maybe like 2 seconds until I realized who I was reading. And you've always been a person where your self-expression has always been unique. I think the first time I seen you on campus down there at Western, you had on like yellow pants, a red blazer, something else. So so I'm like, yep, this blog lines up exactly with who Rayvon is.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Yeah.
just a testament, like you said, to not subscribing to those norms and
Yeah.
being yourself. Because who is to say that you can't start these sentences with this lowercase word?
Yeah.
But one of the other things that I noticed on your blog is you always have a number, 7 tips to help with
Yeah.
this, 5
Yes.
strategies to help with that. So is that
Yes.
always very intentional on your part as to providing step by step directions for people to
Yes.
improve?
Yes, absolutely. I think that it's mutually beneficial for me, right? Because I feel like starting with the number does that exact thing that you were talking about, right? It allows me to categorically tell you my thoughts on the matter, my heart on the matter, right? But also, just from a psychological standpoint, I think that reading could be very mundane to a lot of people. A lot of people don't enjoy reading. It's just not one of their favorite things. And we could talk about like all the reasons that that is so. But I found that, well, I didn't find this originally. My thought was that if I tell you how many is going to be and make them modular, you can come into it at whatever point you want to come into it. You can stop reading it at whatever point you want to stop reading it. It'll still make sense because I'm like making these digestible so that you can just get them however quickly you want to get them or however slowly you want to walk through them. So that's pretty much why I start with numbers.
So, I mean, you always been able to distinguish yourself from, like other people, like John mentioned. How important is you being your own person and marching to the beat of your own drum?
Super critical. I think without that, I wouldn't be where I'm at. I talked about like God's role in that and like how my spiritual background has like kind of propelled me here just because I've allowed myself to like operate in discernment, but also just make sure that what I'm doing is aligned with like the vision that He has for my life. But I think um, finding who I was and finding my own identity was very hard because again, as Black men, you're fighting off like what society is telling you that you need to be. So like anything that's other than that is somewhat like you were pretty ridiculed and you got to deal with a lot. Like, so I've been called probably everything in the book, like, because it's different, because it's not like normal, so to
Mhm.
speak. Staying true to who I was, but first figuring out who I was independent of like what society said and just figuring out the impact that I wanted to have and how that I want to exist in the world. Um, that was key. And John talked about the pants and the blazers. That was a moment in time. I don't know if I'm there. You see, I got an all black.
Yeah.
That was a time. That was in my youth. I feel like, but, yeah, like I'll probably still pop out like that with the color for like with a tie or like an accessory, but probably not like I was loud. I was loud. I don't regret
But
that, but yeah, it was a different.
I think, like I said, it was a form of self-expression. And I think you just seemed so comfortable in your own skin. And,
Yeah.
there's people you can see that, you know, are trying to deliberately fit in for whatever reasons. And like Glenn said, you just seem to always just march to the beat of your own drum. And I think having that, self-awareness and self-confidence is what allows you to propel in your career. Because like you said, when you had that person hit you up saying like this guy must clearly not be educated because of the way that your blog was written, it's easy for someone who's self-confident and aware of who they are as an individual to easily dismiss that.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure each of us on this call have had tons of, stones thrown at us and at our character
Yes.
and things like that. And as long as you're aware of who you are as an individual, it's easy to just
Mm-hmm.
stand on that and move past some of the criticism.
You mentioned something that it's like an ongoing trend, right? It's you're always going against the status quo. Whether it's with
Yes.
your writing, whether it's with you joining a committee or e-board, whether it's conventional norms that we're used to, you always find a way to push that envelope. Why is
Yes.
that?
If not me, then who, bro? If not now, then when? That's that's it. I feel like everything. Think about it. Like you know, disruptors are the people who impact history and who change how we do stuff. Like you got to be able to disrupt. And like for me, I like to creatively disrupt. For like, but you can disrupt differently in like a medical field or like if you were a lawyer or if you were an educator. Like there's whatever our chosen field is. I feel like we all have an obligation to disrupt. And disrupt means dismantling whatever systems are in place that stop people that look like us from being successful. It means, from my lens, of like getting our voices amplified and getting our stories out there in the same magnitude that everyone else's story seems to be out there. It's like showing other Black and brown boys and girls that you can aspire to do this, but you can actually do this. Like it's one thing to aspire to do something, but it's one thing to like be very devout on your commitment to see that happening as well. So I feel like it's not enough for you to be like, yo, Ray made this book, it's so dope. That's great, but what does the book represent? Like, what does this book mean to me? What can it possibly mean to you? How can you take this book and use it as a baton to go further in whatever field that you're trying to do? Like people think that, oh, I'm not trying to do a podcast, so I don't have to listen to what Glenn and Jonathan say, or, oh, I'm not a creative, so like whatever Rayvon's talking about is not relevant to me. And I think you couldn't be more wrong about that. Like you could learning comes from everywhere. Like it's literally like limiting yourself like that is probably why a lot of us are in the same place that we've been in for like the past decade, because we feel like what we consider success to come from is the very thing that is limiting us from like going how far we can actually go, because we think we got it all figured out. If you had it figured out, you'd be further by now.
Facts. I love that
Yeah.
concept that you said of, constantly being a disruptor. And I mean, as soon as you said that, it just reminded me of an experience that I had recently, this past school year. I had a student, at the first day of class, I always introduce myself like, hello, I'm Dr. John Devereaux, yada, yada, yada. One person emailed me afterwards, like, I've never seen a doctor that looks like, and see, that's where you can get caught up. And that's why it is very important to have people in these different roles to
Yes.
really slam down that perceived, I don't want to say stereotype, but stereotype of what this person looks like. What does a writer look like? A writer doesn't have long beard and
Yes.
the hair like that. No, writers
Yes.
do.
Yes.
A realtor is not walking around with a Nike cap on. No, Glenn
Hey, come
is,
on. Hey.
and it's really about, people are all individuals, and the way that they choose to express themselves doesn't take away from their creativity, their articulation, or their education. So I
Yes.
think it's really important for people to be themselves, their authentic selves, as Jarnay stated on our last episode, and walk in whatever your purpose is, because you never know who you would be inspiring.
That's what creative disruption for me is all about. That's what like disrupting in whatever your field is. It doesn't matter like what field you're in. It's like whatever you chose to do, okay, just you should just aspire to be the best in that and just work to be cold. I was brought up not by like my family, but I was like socialized to think that like believing in yourself was a bit egotistical. So for a long time, coming to Western, I would try to dim like my light to make other people feel comfortable. I never, my biggest fear at one point was like, I just don't want people to think I'm full of myself. I just don't want people to think like, cause that's not who I am. I'm just very confident. But now I'm just like, hey, if you're threatened by that, that's a you problem. That's not a me problem. Like, cause I'm not, one thing, I'm not going to be disrespectful. I'm not trying to be narcissistic. I just believe wholeheartedly in like what I do. And I'm passionate about that. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with, I know that I'm a great writer. I know that I'm a versatile writer. I know that. So it's just kind of like when people say stuff that, contradicts that, it doesn't affect me as much. Like it may sting, but it's just kind of like you said earlier, Jonathan, like, I mean, I know who I am, I know like what I do. And I feel like, these are things that we're learning through trial and error, but I feel like we're helping to set the foundation so that the next generation of our kids, their kids don't have to learn through trial and error in the same way. They can like go learn some other stuff that we're not even thinking about right now.
So I think when you're walking in that confidence, and you are talking about maybe some of the accolades that you've achieved, the point isn't to highlight yourself. I think for me, it's like to highlight to any other kid that came from a low income background, a
Yeah,
minoritized or marginalized background. If I can do it, you can definitely do it. And that's what I try
absolutely.
to tell my students. Like,
Yeah.
if I can come from, like you said, like the public education system, and have all these other external circumstances going wrong around me, then
Hmm.
you can do that as well. And hopefully people
Yeah.
don't mistake that confidence, or that perceived to be cockiness.
Yeah.
Hopefully they don't do that. But
What I've learned before is like everybody's not going to get it. If everybody got it, we'd all be at the same level, and that like literally goes against like how the world works. So it's like it took me a minute to understand like everybody's not going to be able to go. Like I mean, that's just it. Everybody can't go. Like
How do you balance that work life? Trying to stay, committed to your friends so you don't lose that relationship, but
yes,
also still trying to go, 10 times as hard as you can to, make your dreams a reality.
yes. I mean, full disclosure, I'm still figuring that out. Like the balance part. I think that between my job and like every other creative project that I have going on, I have to have like tunnel vision to understand like, yes, this is a struggle right now, but it's going to lead to something else later. And it's just kind of like the relationships that I'm optimistic that the relationships that are tried by fire during my like hone in all creativity phases those are the ones that would be strengthened, and I feel like I'll handle that when I get there, as far as like restoring those relationships and building those back up. But like if they don't make it to that part, I've reached a point where I'm just like, I mean, it happened, and I can't, if I don't make me choose between something and creativity, because I'm going to choose creation. Like I'm going to. So it's just kind of like, I'm still figuring out the balance thing. It's like I try to, um, from a practical standpoint, I try to go out at least once a week, like go out as far as like go to like a friend's house, and just like, maybe just watch a game, or like have a beer or something like that, just to like get myself out, physically get myself out of the, excuse me, physically get myself out of the place that I'm always creating, because I can't relax here, because this is where I'm in this work from home era. Is like I'm working here
Yeah.
all the time. So it's like I can't relax in the place that I'm always working. So it's like
Mhm.
I have to like physically leave the house to like, go chill. So I'm still figuring that out. Honestly, I don't know if I'm ever going to like get this perfect balance, but I think it's just going to constantly be a game of like pulling and tugging. Some relationships will make it, some won't. Some work will make it, some won't. And it's just, I'll apply my learnings to the next time. And that's where I'm at with it.
And I think, that's something that really isn't talked about much is, we always talk about the upside of being
Yep.
a creative individual, but there is also that negative side that can come along with it as well. One of the things, just to kind of switch the topic really quick, is you mentioned, and this is another quote from you, that words are your superpower. So how important is it, I guess, with the creating to continue like that blog, and then I even know that you do some public speaking, to share your story as well. So how important is it to get these stories, these thoughts, out there to the public?
Incredibly important, man. Like that quote, um, words are my superpower. I use them to make people think, feel, and occasionally move. And it's just kind
Mhm.
of like that's we talk about creativity being at the core of who I am. And it's like my chosen way to do that is through words. And I've learned to position words as my superpower, because um you can use words to make people think. You can use them to make people feel, and ultimately you want to get them to like do some sort of action, right? So that's where the move part comes in. And that's, I love that. It's very anthemic for me. That's very aspirational, and it
Mm.
reminds me why I started writing in the first place. I think that words are probably the most um ever present slash intimate way of communicating. Like I still write letters occasionally to
Mm.
people. I'll like mail them. Um, I have like a loose book, this leather bound book that a friend got me for a birthday a couple of years ago, that I've just started to use as a poetry book. So it's like 3 years, 2 or 3 years of poetry, just long form from my hand
Wow.
in this book. And I just think words are just powerful, man. Like if I were to die today, somebody's going to find that book, and that is going to have new life. Like I think through our creativity we become immortal in a way, because it's just like a piece of you is always going to be here, which is why we're listening to like songs from people who died years ago, which is why we're like looking at art and exhibitions of people who died like almost a century ago, because like through our art we're always here. So it's like words are my way
Mhm.
doing that, because like even when I'm not here, you'll still be able to hear my voice. You'll still be able to know my matter, my stance on a lot of stuff, because I'm just writing all the time.
And I think
Absolutely.
that's where that visual book comes into play too. Like that's something that's just going to really stand over time. Like you'll
Yes.
always have those images that you can always look back on, to see like in 2020, this is what I did,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and the visual
Yes.
representation and the stories that came along with that. So
Yes.
like
Absolutely.
I'm just stuck on that book, man. Let's
Yeah. The book is good.
Definitely. Yeah, I definitely appreciate that, man. It's been great too. I got like all these I only have like two proofs right now, and they're like all marked up, man. I'm like, man, I'm like a creative now. Like I'm just like, oh, I'm like out here, but I'm just thankful for the process. It's been quite the experience that I'm excited about, and I've been documenting some of it. So who knows?
Mm.
I don't have
Yeah.
I don't have like a This is you already here first. I don't have a plan yet with what I'm about to do with that, but I have been documenting this behind the scenes experience with like bringing this book to life, from like my frustrations to like my small wins to like that's where I've been at with this whole thing and how it actually came to your doorstep.
Absolutely. So my question for you then, with all that being said, can we expect for you to be doing something like this again?
Ooh, um, I think that it's not far-fetched to think that I would do something like this again. Will it happen this coming Black History Month? Likely not. Considering how long it took me to do this book as far as like the photos and stuff. But I do think because it took such a long time, the first time I was able to take in and through osmosis like all of the learning moments from that. And I'm constantly looking back at that experience to see like, okay, how can I streamline this next time? So I think a lot of people, that's a question that I get a lot. They're like, you should do it from queen to queen. You need to do it from this and this. Just like I love that. Love that. Thank y'all for that. Keep the ideas coming. But I have an idea that I'm like percolating with now for Black History Month. That would be an extension of the book. So like for this coming Black History Month, it may not be another book in this form. It may be another form, another medium that I use that comes out in Black History Month, but it will be linked to King to King.
So you've been a staple in Silicon Valley. So, working for Apple for 4 years and other companies as well. What advice would you have for any students that are currently, getting ready to graduate or graduate within the next couple of years, or, any entrepreneurs out there who are just looking to kind of, follow the path that you did?
Yeah, so I'll start with the entrepreneurs first. I feel like, first of all, you need to like just own your journey. You need to understand that like no two journeys are the same. Like if I knew the journey that was ahead, I probably would not have signed up for it. Full disclosure. If I knew what it was going to take, like, do I regret taking it? No, but it was a lot. Like when you write it down on a piece of paper, it's like, who really wants to go through that? Like who wants to not have insurance? Like, I mean, come on. I've worked at like Macy's, Chipotle, Nordstrom, Panera Bread. Like this is not, and this is with a smile though, with the nonprofits. I've been paid hourly. Like I have not gotten what I was deserved in more ways than one. And it's just kind of like, who wants to go through that, right? Like if you see that on paper, like this is how long this is going to last. This is who would sign up for that, honestly? But I think entrepreneurs need to understand like your journey is your journey and you're on it. You need to make a decision right now. Are you going to be in it for the long haul or are you not? Because if you are not willing to put in the sweat, the tears, the frustrations, do yourself and do everyone else a favor and just stop. Pick another line and do something else. I'm tired of seeing businesses come out and that's it. And we don't hear anything else. It's just kind of like, you have to like align yourself and like get some discernment. Like I'm seeing people like 7, 8, 9 businesses out, and it's just like, what happened to this one? What happened to this? What happened to this? And it's like now you're just like chasing something when what you have is already within you, and you need to just look in the mirror. Like you're chasing what you think is successful to everyone else's metrics, but it's like when you're in tune with who you already are. I had a friend who said this like 2 years ago. She said, you don't have to lie to kick it. You ain't got a lot to kick it. You're already cool. And I feel like that's for entrepreneurs. They need to hear that. Like you already cool. You got it. You got the sauce already. It's just like align yourself with the people. And I feel like it's not always, let me hit up Glenn real quick. Let me hit up Jonathan real quick because they got a podcast and I'm trying to do one. Because Jonathan and Glenn might not respond to you. That doesn't mean that y'all funny acting. You don't know why they didn't respond to you. How about you go to Google and you watch some YouTube videos and you pick up a book and you just start making stuff and breaking stuff and repeating the process. Like stop waiting on other people to usher you in these answers that you think that you are deserving of, because ultimately nobody owes you anything. Like no one owes you anything. So it's just kind of like, that's a very narcissistic approach to entrepreneurship, to think that, oh, I hit this person up and they didn't hit me back. So what? Stop taking everything personal. Like your emotions are getting consumed with this and now you can't create because now you bent out of shape and now you like bitter. Get over it. okay, you know how many people, friends, these are friends of mine. And like, I'm like, dang, I know you hit me up like a month ago. I apologize. Like, and it's just kind of like, no one needs that type of energy. It's not conducive for the creative process. So it's just kind of like, you need to make a decision. My advice for entrepreneurs would be make a decision today. What do you want to be? And what do you want to be and where do you want to be? Use your answers from there and move accordingly. And if you decide to be an entrepreneur, I don't want to see you publicly complaining about customers, all this other crazy stuff. Use your wolf pack and your succinct circle for that. Everything doesn't need to be on social media, like for real. Now, for the students, the students of life and the students in the educational systems that want to get into creative fields, I feel like my body language just shifted. I just became more compassionate to like these people. I just read like the entrepreneurs. I'm like, you need to do this, and now I'm like, for the students.
Right.
But no, for the students, again, like students of life, or whether you're like students in the traditional sense and like whatever educational level that you're in, I feel like be kind to yourself, first of all, and understand that it's a marathon, not a sprint. Like, it's just kind of like there's this concept of an overnight sensation is very dangerous, especially in the world of social media, because it would lead you to believe that you don't have to put a lot of work in to get a big return. And that's just ultimately not the reality for a lot of people. I won't say not the reality for everyone, because some people, it did work out like that. That's not common though. And I think that wherever you are in this process, just try to figure out what you want to do and how you want to show up, and be honest with yourself about your interests. It's okay to not know what you want to do. It's okay to try a lot of different things. Full disclosure, when I first started at Apple, I think this was my first day. Someone told me that they were very confused by my portfolio. It seemed like it was all over the place and I didn't know what I wanted to be. This is the first day. And I was like, I took it with a smile. I'm like, okay, thank you for that. And you know what I did? That portfolio came down that night. Like, it was just like, okay, I secured the job at least. Well, let me take this down. And it was the truth. And it was, he kind of started with the question, like, what type of writer do you want to be? What type of creative do you want to be? And I was like, I don't know yet. I'm still figuring it out. And he said, I could tell from your website. I said, yeesh. But looking back, it was all over the place. I had like some modeling stuff in there, some art direction stuff in there, some writer stuff in there, some music stuff in there. It's just kind of like, what? Okay, I understand you want to be this quintessential creative, but it's like you haven't done anything impactful yet to do that. Like, you have, being like a jack of all trades, or a Jane of all trades, is a privilege that not everybody has earned. Like, you have to have some buy-in already from like something, from a very specific thing, before you can just say like, I'm gonna do all these things. Because you look at it like, oh, I'm good at all these things, I'm not gonna let the system oppress me and put me in a box. And the world is looking at it like, you don't know what you got going on, and you can't possibly be great at all these things because you low-key just started. So it's just like, I don't know which one it is, but it's just like, you charging premium rates, and I'm not seeing premium product or premium services. So it's like, I'm good on you. So I would say, like, figure out what you want to do, or at least get a short list, you feel me, of like the things that you're interested in, and just go from there. To be honest, don't let people impose on you their own fears and their own shortcomings. Like, figure out what you want to do, and like, just be honest with yourself and stick with that.
Man, so I mean that's a really good response, and that's some good advice, I think, to both like the students and the entrepreneurs. So as we wrap up, we just want to thank you, Rayvon, for your time. As much as you
Yeah.
kept saying, like, how busy you are, that makes it a little bit more special that we were able to secure you for this
Right.
episode. So we don't take it for granted, you coming on and sharing your experience and your expertise, and also your advice with our listeners. Can you let the people know how they can reach out to you in terms of like acquiring any of your material or your blog?
Yeah, so my website is cuzraysaid.com, which is CAUSERAYSAID.com. And I'm not sure if the book will go back out, to be honest, but you all should definitely stay tuned on the website for more information regarding that, because if it does go back out, I'm just going to make a banner and make sure it's on my homepage that information is out. And then that's also where you can keep in tune with my blog. I am a blog writer, as we've been talking about a couple of times throughout. So yeah.
This is another episode of the Whooping the Doctor podcast. Again, I'm your host, Glenn Curry, alongside my co-host, Dr. John Devereaux. So if you're on YouTube, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment below. And whatever you're listening to, make sure you subscribe.